This is part two of our two podcasts on the life of Brian Spencer, a cautionary tale where a person with $1 million talent had basically so much drama in his life and so much of pain in his life that it ended his life too soon at the end of 38. Despite all the mistakes he made, despite all of this stuff that was self-inflicted or inflicted on others, I genuinely believe Brian Spencer wasn't a bad person. Just the fact that at the time, with the issues we were going through, wasn't like 2021. There would be help for him. Now, Brian Spencer's NHL career, in my opinion, was one of overachieving. He made the Stanley Cup with Buffalo in 75, was a key player with Buffalo, the Islanders, Toronto, and somewhat Pittsburgh before basically he got fed up and quit hockey. But what happened the year he turned pro and what happened after he retired is the stuff, three different stories that are stuff of CSI Miami, and in this case CSI Florida. Now we're going to talk about the three major incidents in Brian Spencer's career. Now we provide the information as public information, not to criticize or to demean his legacy, but it's quite interesting how this worked out. Now, a lot of people credit Roy Spencer, Brian's father, as being the catalyst for his hockey career. And now in the book and movie, Gross Misconduct, the movie was directed by Academy Award nominee Adam McGowan for the CBC a few years ago. Probably one of the best TV movies that most of North America has not seen. It details the incident where Roy Spencer's father was shot dead during a standoff with the RCMP on December 12, 1970, that concluded a bizarre incident during his son's rookie year in the NHL when he was playing with Toronto. Now, at home in Fort St. James, BC, Spencer, was then 57, had planned to watch Brian play for Toronto in a home game for Chicago that was televised nationally on Hockey Night in Canada. Roy was obviously excited about the game since he'd been pushing Brian towards a pro hockey career his whole life. Now, the game again versus Chicago would only be Brian's third contest of the season, following a call-up from Tulsa, and the first to be televised nationally. Now, Roy had heard from Brian before the game that his son was going to be the broadcast interview's guest during the second intermission. Unfortunately, Roy wasn't able to watch the game because Hockey Night in Canada was showing viewers in BC a game between the first-year Vancouver Canucks and the California Seals. Now, prior to that season, Roy Spencer has always been able to watch Toronto games, but the addition of the Canucks had changed the local broadcast priorities. We call it regional contests, like if Toronto was the national game, sometimes Quebec would get Montreal. Now, Roy Spencer did not understand why he could not watch Brian's game on TV and became enraged. Now, this is broken down in the book and movie, and in the movie, of course, it was the stuff of what he called Adam McGowan style direction. Now, carrying his handgun, he got into his car and drove 2 hours to the headquarters of CKBPG, the CBC network affiliate station in Prince George. When he got there, Spencer took the employees hostage and demanded them to stop broadcasting entirely, presumably as punishment for not having shown the Toronto game. When the RCP arrived on the scene and demanded Spencer surrender, he refused. The angry Roy Spencer shot a constable in the foot while resisting arrest, and the gunfire was returned, resulting in Roy Spencer's death. When Spencer was informed that his father had died, he decided not to go home until later and opted to play the following day's game versus Buffalo, where he had 3 assists. Now, upon retirement, Spencer moved to South Florida. He was mostly a mechanic and truck driver in Palm Beach County for a number of years. By 1987, he was hanging out with a rough crowd. He had moved to South Florida and, according to published reports, struggled with alcohol and drug addiction as he attempted to transition to life outside of hockey. Now, his life took a turn for the worse on January 1887 when he was arrested in West Palm Beach, Florida, and charged with the February 4, 1982 murder of Palm Beach Gardens restaurant owner Michael James Dalfo, whose father was a prominent South Florida realtor. Spencer was held without jail at the Palm Beach County Jail after pleading not guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping charges on January 22nd. Now, this case is broken down in the Gross Misconduct book and the infamous Sports Illustrated article, which is considered one of the greatest ever written about the dark side of hockey. If you can find it on the archives, it had the famous line, "Attitudes are more important than facts," which most journalists like me that cover the law use as a mantra. Now, because this was a death penalty case based on secret testimony presented to a grand jury by Spencer's former girlfriend, who was a reported prostitute who worked for an escort service, the woman claimed Spencer was the last person she saw with Dalfo, even though she had not seen a murder take place. A warrant for Spencer's arrest was first issued on December 8, 86, although nearly 5 years had passed since the murder, and the case had only recently been reopened. Police said Spencer had been a suspect all along. Now, Dalfo, who had been shot twice in the head, was an acquaintance of Spencer's at the time of his death, and police said the murder involved some sort of revenge for mistreatment of Spencer's girlfriend, who Dalfo had hired as an escort. According to published reports, he was not found dead, but dying. Now, Dalfo's own parents questioned the accusation since he didn't believe their son even knew Spencer, as police claimed. Spencer's own friends were also convinced Spencer was not involved in Dalfo's murder, saying he was not capable of such a crime. And members of the Maple Leafs did appear at court to say that, and I think Davy Keon as well, which was a good friend of Spencer. Now, Spencer trial in West Palm Beach lasted roughly 1 week, and on October 16, 87, jurors needed only 1 hour of deliberations before declaring that he was not guilty. Spencer had an alibi in a former bartender who said he was with Spencer at his workplace during the supposed time of the murder. The turning point, however, came when the defense showed that the escort service Spencer's ex-girlfriend worked for was involved in the kind of illicit activities that suggested numerous suspects were more likely to have been responsible. Although it was clear the experience devastated Spencer. A book by Martin O'Malley, who talked about gross misconduct, the life of Spinner Spencer, published after his death in the fall of 88, focused on this part of his life as well as his childhood and the story of his father's death. Spencer was said to be excited about the book and look forward to the publication, since it was going to help clear his name for good. Like I said, O'Malley's book was again later adapted for that made-for-TV movie, which aired in Canada February 28, 1993, in what he called the golden era of Adam McGowan's directorial exploits. Now, we talked about Spencer dying shortly after conclusion of the case. He died at the age of 38 after midnight on the night of June 2nd, 88 in South Florida. Police said Spencer had been shot to death after purchasing crack cocaine. The police report of the incident said that Spencer and a friend named Gregory Scott Cook had been driving through a seedy section of Riviera Beach between 11 p.m. and midnight looking to purchase drugs. Cook told police that he and Spencer bought 1 rock of crack, and then Cook drove several blocks before stopping his pickup truck. While the truck was stopped, another 2 men in a white car pulled up behind it, and then one of the men walked over to the driver's side window where Cook was sitting. The man demanded money from Cook and Spencer in a robbery that appeared unrelated to the drug deal. Cook gave the man the only $3 he had. Spencer offered nothing because he had no money or was resisting the demand, and then the man shot Spencer in the left arm with a bullet that went straight through his heart before stopping his abdomen. Sadly, Spencer had been told by his attorney, Barry Weinstein, to leave Palm Beach County just a short time before the shooting because Weinstein suspected danger there. In fact, Spencer allegedly had no intention of purchasing drugs that night until Cook arrived at his home and asked him to come out and help repair another friend's car. While he was out with Cook, the two went to a local bar. Then Cook allegedly decided to buy drugs, asking Spencer to join him. Spencer was shot in a region where police said he had been known to have purchased drugs several times in the past. Cook, who was a convicted former drug dealer himself, rushed Spencer to a nearby fire station. He was taken to St. Mary's Hospital in West Palm Beach and pronounced dead at 12:12 a.m., some 12 minutes later, on the morning of June 3rd. A day later, on the morning of June 3rd. A memorial service was held June 9th, 88 in Spencer's hometown of Fort St. James, BC. Now, 2 suspects were soon questioned in connection with Spencer's murder. There were 36-year-old Leon Lump Daniels of Riviera Beach and 31-year-old Larry Willie Johnson, also of Riviera Beach. Police did not have enough evidence to arrest the men, but on June 28, almost 4 weeks after the murder, Daniels turned himself into police, saying that although he had been in the car behind Spencer's and was not the one who pulled the trigger, before he was taken in custody, Daniels ran away from the police station, having refused to identify his accomplice. Now, Daniels fled to Oklahoma and managed to avoid being captured until December of '88, when his mother persuaded him to cooperate with police in hopes of a lighter sentence. At first, Daniels claimed that he and Johnson had targeted Cook and Spencer because they'd used a counterfeit $100 bill to buy crack from them. However, Daniels later recounted that story and said that the whole thing was part of a botched robbery, being that Spencer was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He said Johnson had come up with the idea of a random robbery for extra cash. Johnson asked Daniels to drive his mother's car while he sat beside him in the search of a victim. When Johnson saw Cook's pickup truck, he told Daniels to stop the car. Daniels said Johnson then got out of the car, walked over to the pickup truck, and pointed the gun at Cook. Daniels said the robbery appeared to be going smoothly, but before something happened that caused Johnson to fire at the person in the passenger seat. Daniels' story matched Cook and led to a September 12, '89 plea bargain for Daniels, in which he pled guilty to second-degree murder, robbery, and attempted robbery in exchange for an 18-year prison sentence. Daniels also agreed to testify against Johnson, who had immediately claimed that Daniel was the murderer after being charged in the case. On December 19, '89, Johnson also pled guilty to second-degree murder, as well as attempted armed robbery with a firearm, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He got 40 years in prison for the murder charge and a 15-year concurrent sentence for the other charges. Now, there's speculation because gross misconduct was done like a Capote style. The scene where the person playing Spencer is shot, he was being sarcastic at the time. So probably the speculation was Spencer said something that the attempted robber didn't really understand or didn't enjoy, or the gun went off by accident, because sometimes they call it itchy trigger finger. But the death of Spencer at the age of 38, I can tell you this, when he retired, there was a lot of question he might come back, especially in the new associations and teams in the IHL, CHL, and AHL. And senior hockey across Canada was starting to build up, but he was in Florida at the time. But the popularity of Brian Spencer internationally, because, the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time were a lot more popular than they are in 2021. Brian Spencer was seen as part of the youth movement that included, Lanny McDonald, Sittler, Dupont, Ian Turnbull, Ricky Lee, all the top players. Now, even Spencer playing with the Islanders was he was a very popular guy. But in Buffalo, again, the 1970, mid-70s Buffalo Sabres, where Spencer was a part of, when he passed, I think people in Buffalo took it the hardest, because he was a hometown hero. There's very scenes in the Out Going movie that talk about that, how there was certain DJs would play certain songs in tribute to Spencer. Spencer would show up kind of like a Derek Sanderson style at many events in Buffalo. And again, his trade to Pittsburgh wasn't, what he expected. So if you have a chance, there is, the movie Gross Misconduct is on DVD out there. I think there's VHS copies as well. But the uploaded version on the internet, there's an age limit, because the scenes involving allegedly that prostitute girlfriend included random nudity. But actually, one of the Ashmore brothers or twins is in the movie. He plays a young Brian Spencer. If you know the Ashmores, one of them has been in the X-Men movie, while the other one has been a prominent actor in Canadian and American episodic television. So, Brian Spencer, again, I saw him play, a very, very determined young man. The only thing I can compare it with, you look like a Ken Linsman, a little bit of Barry Tremblay, again, a little bit of what I call the modern grinder, like the overachiever. Brian Spencer wasn't the most talented player, but my God, he worked hard, ladies and gentlemen. And I got all the respect in the world, especially for the Spencer family, what they went through the years, to lose his father, to lose him to the murder case, to lose him a third time. And it was been rough on the Spencer family. And I'm doing this with all due respect. I want people to remember his whole life, but the majority, I think, his play, because a lot of parents that came up in the 1980s and 90s that were coaching hockey, they always told stories about Brian Spencer, how dedicated he was. Sure, he may have had mental problems and he had anger issues or what they call personality issues, but it doesn't diminish his talent. And his worst victim was himself, ladies and gentlemen. That's what happens when the lure of the lights goes away. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like our two-part podcast on Brian Spencer, give us a like, comment, or subscribe. And if you knew Brian Spencer, or you know and expand on the information presented, let me know. I took majority information from published reports from the CBC and Hockey Draft Central and other locations. I hope it was as accurate as possible. If there's any corrections needed, let me know, or expanding, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening. Keep your stick in the ice. Bye.